evening, people. We have several of you live already with us. We've got Facebook users saying hello all. Hello, Facebook user. Remember that if you are on with us at the moment and we can't see your name, it's because you've not given StreamYard permission. So you either have to tell me who you are when you comment if I don't know who you are, or you have to give StreamYard permission to show your name and profile, etc. So we are here. Hello, Nadia. Hello, Charlotte. We are here to talk to Gareth Meadows about making a big dream happen and lots of other things besides. And this is one of a run of Rebel Role Model interviews we've got going on at the moment. So I'm really, really excited to kind of get into this next one. Hello, Paul. So thank you for those of you who are here. Thank you for those of you who are watching on replay in the future. Please comment. Please ask questions of me and especially of Gareth. And I'm going to bring him in right now. Here he is. With hand wave. Your hand looked massive then in front of the camera.
Okay. Is that better? Good evening, everyone.
Good evening to you. So we're here to talk about all sorts of good juicy stuff. And I guess the best place to start would be to introduce who you are. So you and I both worked at what we call the Big Glass House at Preston Brook in sort of Warrington, Runcorn area. Used to be O2. Is now Capita, and you still work there, right? Or in various capacities around that general thing.
Yeah, I still work for the company. We're now Virgin Media O2. I started back in 1996 when it was Martin Dawes Telecommunications, and I think we've changed name about half a dozen times, if not more, since then.
BT Cellnet then after that.
Oh yeah, BT Cellnet, Lumina. Yeah. Telefonica O2. Yeah, and it's fun, but it's always just been a job for me. I took it on for 6 months back in 1996, and I'm still there.
So funny, I love that. So tell us why we're here, really, because I did a couple of weeks ago or so, I did sort of open up the opportunity really for people to approach me to come and do a Rebel Role Model interview if they wanted. And you got a bit of a nudge, didn't you, to reach out and say, hello, I'll do one. So tell me why that happened to you.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't use Facebook anymore. I really don't. I kind of started to demur away from it. I think it had become a little bit toxic, family issues and things like that. I just started staying away from Facebook, but I just very occasionally go on, and pretty much purely because I absolutely love what it is you do with your group, and it just kind of, sometimes I just need to brighten my day a little bit, and I go on there and I look at your posts and I look at the responses that come in, and it is just one of those few bright spots in social media in general, but Facebook in particular, where I think that's something that I really engage with, and that just makes a lot of sense to me. So I saw the post go up, and being honest, after the past few years, and I don't want to talk too much about the pandemic because it's incredibly depressing, but we've all been through all that, and I've been one of those people all through my life. I'm not naturally a super confident person. I think I've been good at faking that throughout my entire life, and I think a lot of people who know me for a long time probably think I am that very confident, outgoing person, and I'm not. I'm really not. But I am good at putting on a bit of a show. So I've always been one to try and push myself out there and push myself out of my comfort zone, and I think I've fallen out of that habit a lot during the pandemic, and getting back out into the world's a little bit scary. But I'm really conscious that I want to try and push myself more into situations that make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that make me want to push myself even further. And that's really important as part of my journey of being a writer. I know it's not enough to just sit in a room, just scribble away and writing, because if I do, I'm just writing for me. And I don't just want to write for me, I want to write for other people. And it's important to get myself out there. So I thought I'd reach out to you and put myself into the scary situation of speaking to a bunch of strangers online.
And well done for doing that, and thank you for doing that, because I think there's probably an awful lot that you've got to share that other people massively benefit from. And I know when we had the precursor conversation for this, we got some really good stuff out, and I'm really keen to make sure that people benefit from that. So tell us a little bit, it's sort of it's whistle stop as you can, because I know there's an awful lot you could tell us. Tell us kind of what's got you to where you're at now with the writing. A quick kind of synopsis of your journey. Tell us about your life, that kind of thing.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that the only thing I ever wanted to do, apart from maybe being a stuntman for about 6 months when I was 12, was to be a writer. And that's the only thing that ever really made sense to me. From a really young age, I'd write my own little comic books and scripts for the Bill and Casualty and things like that.
Oh, wow.
And little short stories and poems and all sorts of things. And it was just that was my way of expressing myself, of bringing these ideas and thoughts out of my head and making them make sense. And so that was something that was always really important. And I knew that's what I wanted to do, or more to the point, that's what I wanted to be. I was a writer, and I've always said to my own kids, it's like, find somebody who will pay you to do something that you love, and then you've not worked a day in your life. So when I was fairly young, so I was 17, I think I'd had enough of the education system, rightly or wrongly, and I kind of stepped out of it. And I managed to blag my way into a job, and I really did blag my way into a job working for a local newspaper. And the thing that taught me most of all is that I didn't want to be a journalist. So yeah, writing is one thing, and being paid to write, great, really loved it, but invading on people's privacy, not for me. Met a lot of great people there, but hats off to anybody, kudos to anybody who makes a career for themselves in that industry, but it wasn't for me. But then things change, and you have to roll with the punches in life. So when my eldest son came along, who's now 26, I needed to find a job that gave more of a regular income and opportunities for earning a bit more cash. So I stepped completely away from journalism, and I took a job working at Martin Dawes Telecommunications, as I say, for 6 months, whilst I could find something else. And then it just kind of fell into the pattern of family and just the grind of day to day. And writing was always that thing I was going to come back to. And it just took me a long time. I think I procrastinated on that. I think I put the pro in procrastination. It took me a long time to really get myself back into the swing of it. I think I scared myself out of it. And although I still had all these ideas and I was making notes, jotting them down, I was never really doing anything to push myself to actually get anything out on the page and to share that writing with anybody else. And I waited for a long time. And it was probably only maybe 6 years ago, I thought, I've got to do something with this. I'm getting older. And you're never too old to start writing. I mean, Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale, I think she was in her 60s before she had anything published. Yeah, I mean, Terry Pratchett, who's one of my favourite writers of all time, is 43. I think he had his first book published in a competition when he was 16, and then his next book was published when he was 43. So there's a big gap there. And he'd had a similar path to me in that he'd gone down the whole family and career and having to focus on that. And then later on, he thought, life's too short. As it turned out for him, really was the case. So he had to push and chase his dreams. So, that was kind of a big push for me. It's you've got to go after what you want. You've got to go after what you desire. It's quite scary to write something and share that with other people. Just seeing Paul's message there. Yeah, absolutely, Paul. It's never too late to do this, and that's the message that I'm hearing from the writers that I meet in the absolutely wonderful writing community, of just keep on pushing, keep on improving, keep on learning, share your message. And that's the only way you improve, is by actually churning some creativity out there, regardless of whether you're a writer or an artist, or whatever you choose to do. Just get it done, get it out there, share it with people, be brave enough to share it with people, get the feedback, and keep on improving.
Yeah.
So, a lesson I learned a little bit later than I would have liked to, but honestly, it's been a fantastic 6 years. I've come so far myself. My writing has improved dramatically. And honestly, I don't think I would have been ready to take the steps that I'm making now at 18, 19, 20. I think I was probably too immature as a human being to really have been able to write anything compelling that other people would have been interested in reading.
That's amazing. I really liked what you said there about, just basically do it and get it out there, and the process of that helps you move, craft your art, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you, Facebook user. Be brave. A mantra I am aiming to live by. Is that Nadia, perhaps? I'm not sure. Oh, no, it's Lisa. It's Lisa. Nice one. Hello, Lisa.
I love that.
And by the way, Paul, who commented before, has written a book already, got that one boxed off, and it is well loved by lots and lots of people. And he's in the process of his second one as well, and crafting his art as we speak, in fact. Which sounds like a euphemism, doesn't it? But it's not. We can send it already, Gareth.
Brilliant.
So I guess my next question really would be, why do you feel compelled to kind of share this story with people? And what are you hoping to be able to leave people with, or the impact or the message or the benefit that people could potentially have from your story and from your experience in this interview?
Well, the main thing is, don't let the fear of doing something frighten you out of doing it. You can't be afraid to start. And as far as writing goes, I mean, I hear some writers talk about writer's block and how it's the worst thing that can happen to a writer. I don't believe that that's true. Writer's block is a problem, and there are ways around it. There are processes that you can employ to help you get past that. It's as difficult to have too much going in your head and too many ideas and not knowing on which one to focus, but you've just got to decide. And the best advice I got from any writer is actually a really successful screenwriter called C. Robert Cargill. You've probably seen his movies, Insidious, The Black Phone, etc. Really generous with his time, really good friend of mine. And the best advice he gave to me is just write. Doesn't have to be great. It's never going to be right at the first pass. It's always going to need work. It's going to need revision. It's going to need refining. You're going to have to share it with people when it's in a rubbish state, because it's going to be terrible the first time you write it. It's not going to be great, but you've got to get that idea down on the page. You've got to get it out, because if you don't, it's just there circling around your head.
Just aim for
exactly. Aim for getting it done. And I'm not going to say there is any one way of achieving those results. I mean, some people are pantsers, so they fly by the seat of their pants. They just sit down, they write, they can keep it all in their head and keep it all lined up. They know all the names of the characters, they know the entire plot line, and can keep it straight in their head for the several weeks, months, years even of writing a book. Hats off to them. I can't do that. That's not me. I have to organize myself because I'm not really naturally very organized. So I have to be really rigid. So I'm a planner. I'm a plotter. So I have to make an arrangement with myself and almost a map, I call it, rather than a plot of start to finish of how I'm going to get there. And so that's my key message for everybody: is find your way, find your own way, find a community that you can share your work with in a trusted, safe environment, because it's that feedback that is really important. And you've got to be prepared to share it when it's rough and not be too defensive when you get the feedback. Even if somebody comes and says, this is crap, you're going to hear that. You're going to hear different feedback from people. And you've got to be prepared to hear that, because you know what? They might be right. And if it's right, that doesn't mean it's the end. It just means you've got to work on it. And that comes back to that advice, that key tenet: just write.
And I guess it's, there's also remembering that not everybody likes everything. Your style may be okay for some and not for others. That was Sean earlier that was saying that he's loving your positivity. So Sean being one of our interviewees soon. Charlotte is liking the rough and readiness. I don't know if that's your personal style or just the advice you're giving. I think it's the advice. And then we've got someone else, I'm not entirely sure. How do you know? How do you know you are there? You have your own way. How do you know when to stop?
That
Oh,
is a
okay.
fantastic question.
Mm.
Okay, so
Find
there
out
are.
who that was. Lisa.
Hello, Lisa. So that is a brilliant question. There are some key things that are really important, regardless of whichever path you choose as a writer. So you can choose to self-publish. You may choose to traditional publish if you feel that there is commercial viability behind a particular idea. For me, I want to do a bit of both. But the main push for me is I want to be a screenwriter. So that's a really hard nut to crack. So you've got to build yourself some collateral. So in terms of how do you know you're there? So I mentioned how important it is to share your work with other people and to get feedback. So that is great. Yeah, you need to find that community of people. You need to find beta readers. You need to find alpha readers. So alpha readers, that's the first really rough draft. Those are the people you trust most in the world, who will give you really honest advice, who will say yes or no, whether they like the basic concept. And then you take it on to the next level. And this is where you feel it's ready to be read by some people. It's not there yet. And you share it with those beta readers. So I'm just reading Paul's message as well. I'll come to that in a moment. So the beta readers, they'll pass over it. Now, the best way to get beta readers, it's a reciprocal arrangement. Now, I found a community on Twitter. I use the writing community on Twitter. Plus, there are a number of different websites, or you can join local groups, or you can join a writing club, or you can join a course, a screenwriting course, novel writing course, creative writing course, just to get yourself aligned to a bunch of other people who are in the same boat. And it's about being prepared to offer the same to them. So, as with everything, there's give and take in life. So you can't just say, here's my work, can I have some people who are willing to read it for me? You've got to be prepared to do the same thing for them and offer your own critique and advice genuinely and honestly, but constructively, because that's always really important. You've got to be constructive. You can't just tear somebody down because this is their baby. You know, this is something that's really important to them. So even if you think it's the worst crap you've ever read, you've got to actually be constructive.
It's like any art, isn't it? It's so personal. It comes from your heart, comes from your soul. And that,
absolutely,
that is a really precious and quite fragile thing sometimes.
Absolutely. And you can't just attack somebody because this is something that is so intrinsic to that person. This is their whole psyche spilled out on a Word document, and you can't just attack it. You have to be constructive. You have to help that person make it the best it can possibly be. And yeah, you've got that's got to build that trust, that two-way rapport. Now, I'm really lucky. I've got probably a dozen different beta readers that I work with, both from a screenwriting perspective and from a novel writing and short story writing perspective, and they share their work with me, and it is completely reciprocal. Now, that's not the end of it. That'll take you to a certain point. If you want to kick on and you want to get something out there that is going to be absolutely as good as it can be, you've got to have an editor. Now, finding an editor is, again, it becomes a bit of a reciprocal agreement. It's you are paying somebody for their time. It can be expensive, but there are ways and ways, and you can use sites like Reedsy to find yourself an editor that is within your price range.
Right, okay. So what was that, Reedsy?
Reedsy, Reedsy. And there you can search for story consultants and editors, etc., and they will advertise their wares and tell you what services they provide and the rate that they will provide for you. And there is somebody out there for everybody, and it is really important to find the right blend. Don't just go for somebody based on them being the cheapest. Somebody cheap might be right for you because you have that rapport, you have that relationship with them, and it is about a relationship of honesty. Yeah. And most editors worth their salt are not just going to take anybody, because again, they have to feel that it's somebody that they can work with. So I'm really lucky. My editor is a former editor-in-chief of Abaddon Books and Rebellion. He decided to take a step away from the 9-to-5 grind and go out and pursue his own dreams, because he'd spent years making other people's dreams come to life. And felt that he was sacrificing his own. So he wanted to pursue his own dreams of being a writer, so he's gone freelance as an editor.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, he's a top guy, John Oliver. His name is.
Too?
I'll put him in touch. He's a lovely, lovely guy. So yeah, his name's John Oliver, not the same John Oliver who's a stand-up comedian, but
Yeah.
but he's a great guy, really constructive, really supportive, really helpful, and he's made so many contacts for me within the industry. I pay for his time. He's not cheap, but absolutely the best thing I've ever done is to employ John's time and to listen to his advice. And he's always been open to me. And it's not always once you commission somebody to work on this for you, it's not a case of you paying for every minute of their time. They will. You tell them the number of words that you've got for them to process through, how big your manuscript is. They'll run through it, but then it becomes a dialogue. And it's a two-way thing. So, and that's really important. And I can go to him for advice. He's now somebody I consider a close friend. So that's really important. Get yourself an editor. If you're wanting to be a screenwriter, you need to get yourself a script consultant. They're usually much more reasonable because scripts are much smaller. Again, find yourself somebody who's good, who's got a good reputation, who's going to help you kick on. But that same process, it's about networking. It's about being prepared to accept critique. That's the biggest challenge, and it's not always going to be fair because it's very subjective, but you've got to be prepared to accept that because this is a really tough industry to crack. Now, it all comes down to what your personal goal is. Now, if your goal is just to get something out there and you're happy to self-publish, that's easy enough. You can get something out on Amazon, as I have here. This is a short story collection that I wrote.
I definitely want to talk about that in a bit.
So please feel free to have a look at Amazon for that at your leisure. But if you want to get something out there and it's just about making it available, putting it out into the world, do it. And that's what I've done with this book here. I know there's no market for this commercially. Short story collections don't really sell, and no publisher's going to be interested unless your name's Neil Gaiman. And even then, he doesn't sell lots of them. He's never going to make money from them. So I might as well. I might as well just put that out into the world and just accept the fact I'm not going to make a lot of money.
It's fascinating, that, isn't it? Yeah, a lot of sort of mediums of art, I guess, that you can't do it for the money. You've got to do it for the love. I mean, even just doing what I've done for many years in cover bands, singing in cover bands. Yeah, you need to get paid a decent amount for a gig, but there's no way that you ever profit from it, because when you add up the number of hours it takes to rehearse, to get yourself to the gig, to set up, to hang around, to muck about for 2 45-minute sets or whatever you might be doing, you're on much less than minimum wage. So you kind of have to do it whilst you don't want to be love about it, you have to do it because it's almost it's life therapy, and it's a way to get out that kind of creative flow. So Tracy's got this great question then. Do you research in preparation for writing a story, or is it just writing your own thoughts and ideas?
So I will openly admit that I'm something of an obsessive, and I want my work to be as accurate as possible. So I do a lot of research. Most writers do, to be fair. But I disappeared down a rabbit hole for 3 hours researching Greek and Roman architecture to add a single word to a novel, Doric. Just that was it. That was it.
Wow.
But that's just me and how my brain works. I mean, if you have a look at my laptop and my iPad and my phone, I've got pages and pages open, researching various different subjects for whatever project I happen to be working on at that time. I want to be as close to accurate as can possibly be. There's only so much you can do in terms of research on the internet. It's a great resource, but again, find people who are experts and go and speak to them. That's really important.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because it's in terms of like Kay's comment earlier, that she's got lots of ideas and concepts and is great at starting things, but perhaps not so much of a finisher. And it's an interesting opposite end of the spectrum for you guys. And I know Kay is very much what we would Paul, who's has a profiling tool called Vita, we would probably class her as what we call an adventurer, so great at ideas and really sparks those things and goes with instinct and follows her heart, and you're quite impulsive, aren't you, Kay? I'm sure you won't disagree with that, but in a really good way. And whereas you've got a level of like that this investigator style where you will analyze things and you will do the research and you'll be very diligent and processed about that. And I know you said that earlier that you're not really that organized, but actually in terms of how you think, you are quite meticulous, aren't you? And it probably explains why you do the job you do. I think this is one of the things that I was really interested in when we talked about the concept of this interview, because I, like Kay, am not very good at that kind of pinning down stuff. And I know for the life, all the stuff you've got going on in your life, it must be quite hard to be disciplined enough to keep following your art when it's not exactly incentivized by a load of profit. So I'm quite intrigued about how you manage that, really.
So again, that's the bit where you've got to be disciplined. So again, just to come back to Kay's point before, I talk about my process and how I've managed to discipline myself into actually being able to create something that a finished product. So I do have a similar issue. Yeah,
Yeah, you're right, JC.
So my problem was I had probably 20 years worth of material in my head. And the more I create, the more ideas I get. Once my brain starts firing, it's just, I mean,
we're like rabbits, aren't they? Ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. They multiply like I don't know what.
By the way, Tracy, I'll be an alpha reader if you want.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, I had so many ideas, and the difficulty was maintaining the excitement after that initial idea to then start working on something. So I over 20 years, I had so many outlines for different stories where I'd start writing the first chapter, or I'd write down, this is the idea for the story, but then didn't really know where to go with it, or I'd start to get a little bit out in my own head. So I'd lose faith in that idea, or another idea would come along and I'd latch onto that. So it's about disciplining yourself, but also leaning on other people. So if you don't know which idea, if you've got 40 different ideas, it's like trying to find a needle in a great big stack of needles. You're not going to be able to decide which one to work on. And I know from experience. So what do? I reach out to people who I know, who I trust, and say, look, these are some of the ideas I got. These are the bankers. These are the ones I think have got legs that I can take further. And I'll come off the writer's block thing in a bit. So which ideas do you think I should focus on? And I go to the people I trust most, and they're typically my alpha readers, close friends, close family members, my eldest son, who I've got a great relationship with, and he's also a writer. And I'll say, look, I'm not necessarily going to take your advice as gospel, but I just want to scatter this out there to people I trust and get your opinions on which ideas I should focus on. And that really helps me, because it helps to formalize my own thoughts. And sometimes it's as much to say, flip a coin. Just pick something and go and work on it and write it to completion.
I suppose it's easy to risk assess and go, is this a good idea, and how will people like it, and how will it play out, and overthink it, and then stifle yourself as a result.
Absolutely. Write the things you love. If it's something you're interested in, there's going to be other people who are interested in it. So go and write it.
Yeah. So what about the writer's block? So this is Charlotte. I've got some great questions coming in, by the way, Gareth. I don't need to ask my own because we've got so many coming in. What happens with writer's block for you then?
So I hear other writers who talk about writer's block, and it is a big issue for them. And I have, to a degree, have experienced it in the past, where you get to a point and you don't know where to go from there. That doesn't happen so much for me because I plan. Now, I talked about my plan and how I approach it, and I think of it more as a map. And what do you need for any map?
Got a question that relates to that. It's good timing.
Yeah, again, I can come on to that as well. So, how do you map something out? So you have to have a beginning, you have to have an end, but then you've got all these points along the way of how you get there. Now, I will plot out very high level. These are the key points. These are the key characters. So I'll write something called a treatment, which is an outline of the novel. So this is the basic story. This is the basic premise behind it. this is what I want to achieve. This is the end goal. And I typically know how it's going to end before I've written word one. At least I know at that stage how it's going to end. But it's like with anything. If you've got a sat nav, the sat nav is doing the mapping for you. But you reach a roadblock, what do? Then you remap. So you maintain.
Do you ever find that a story almost wants to tell you how it wants to go?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I find, as I'm writing characters, their voice kind of comes to me, and it's something that kind of comes out from inside of you.
I love that. It gives me goosebumps a little bit.
Yeah, and their voice becomes their own. And sometimes I'll start writing a character who is going to be a peripheral character. They're just not really that involved, but as soon as their voice starts to come to me, I fall in love with them, and they have to become bigger, more main characters to the storyline. So that all helps by having that map, but maintain your map as you go. You've got to keep it up to date. That way, when you lose track, when you find yourself at a point where I don't know where to go from here, then you can always refer back to your map. Your map helps you to reach your destination.
Yeah, that's great advice.
But even still, you're going to reach moments where you just don't know where to go. You've hit a roadblock. It might even be advice that you've got back from a beta reader or an editor, and you've gone, right, I'm stuck. I don't know where to go. It might be that you're just having a really shitty week, and you don't know what to do next. So, and that's valid. My advice to anybody who's experiencing writer's block, just do what I do, and I've given this advice to lots of friends. Take a step away. Go and do something else.
Yep.
Clear your head. Go for a walk the dog, go to the pub, go and have a conversation, a coffee with a friend. Just try and lose yourself in something else where you're not obsessing about it.
Yeah, because if you chase these things, it runs away, doesn't it? Like, funnily enough, I was talking to Paul again about this last week, that if I'm designing a training package or a coaching course or a piece of something that is creative, I will often get something very similar to writer's block, and I know that if I sit down and try to force it, it's not going to come. So and this has been the same for my whole career. I have to walk away and just let go of it and know that it will come. Now, sometimes I can sit and just start, and even if it's nonsense, it will come to me, or just the process of mind mapping it suddenly allows it to flow in. But if I try and hold on to it and make it be something, it will do its best to resist me. So you have to just honor that, the creative timing. The difficulty comes when you're under pressure, though, doesn't it? And you've got somebody else externally or something else applying that additional pressure.
But creativity is ephemeral, and it won't stay with you.
That's a great word. Tell us what that means.
It means something that won't stay with you forever. It's not very long lasting. It flitters away like a butterfly. And so creativity is not always going to be there with you all the time. So there is another method that I've employed in the past, and that is to go back and read some of your work that you know is good. So you just go back and read some of the stuff that you've done before, and you can find, like I say, creativity inspires creativity. So I found before, I'm reading some of my stuff and going, actually, this is really fucking good. So I like this, and it can often...
When you created that distance from it as well, that must be easier to do sometimes, the distance of time,
Absolutely. And sometimes that's really important. So just take some time away, try and free your mind up. Albert Einstein worked as a patent clerk, and the reason he did that was that it allowed his mind to focus on things that were more important to him by just doing...
It was monotonous and repetitive, the job that he was doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Kay's saying great advice, can write loads on a retreat, but when not distracted. She doesn't get writer's block. How do you plot chapters out and stay on track? I have my material saved in different random places and forget where they are. Okay, that's so you. Need a simple system to pull it all together, perhaps. I favour a Trello board, Kay. I don't know if that helps. What would your advice be, Gareth?
So a couple of different things. So my first major writing project was a massive mistake for me to start with this. I started writing a fantasy trilogy. because I had a dream, and that dream just wouldn't leave me alone, and I had to start work on it.
Wow.
That really pushed me on. I should have really started with some short stories or something. So, so yeah, keeping a pad by the bed is a great idea.
Lisa.
I have my phone here with a notepad, and I wake up in the middle of the night and jot down ideas. Getting away on a writer's retreat if you can, but just find the time, and that's the important thing. So finding that discipline, and I'll talk about some mechanisms that you can utilize for organizing your brain, organizing your thoughts, and how you map these things together. And it is really about disciplining yourself. So what I do today, how I find my time for writing, I don't set myself targets very often about writing a certain number of words. I am doing this month because it's National Novel Writing Month, where you set yourself the target of writing 50,000 words. We're on the 14th of November. I've written 80,000 and 2 screenplay pilots. So, but
wow,
I'm just obsessive, and that's ridiculous, and I wouldn't recommend
just because you've got a lot of words don't mean the good words, though, eh?
Yeah, to be fair, my screenplay pilot is with a script consultant today, so I can submit it to the BBC writers' room later in the week. So I'm just hoping it's not lots of guff.
Trello board, by the way, Kate, it's an app where you can basically create lists and move them around. It works on your desktop and your mobile. It's fantastic. You have create like workspaces and different boards and things like that. It's brilliant for organizing.
I'm going to try that. I like that.
It's really, really good and so easy to use.
So the challenge is finding the time and disciplining yourself to adhere to that time. So word counts, forget word counts, because they're meaningless. Because as you say, you could write 1,000 words of crap, and it doesn't really matter because you might trim it down to 200 tomorrow. It's about getting it done.
And don't worry about material.
And don't worry about revising too much on the fly. Just try and get as much done as you can, so that it's down on paper, and then you can come back and work on it later on. So what I do is I assign periods of time, and I try to keep myself disciplined so that at the end of my working day, rather than me get up and go and have a break and sit down and have a cup of tea or a glass of wine or a beer and then think, oh, I can't be bothered getting back to the laptop now, I'd try and add another hour or 2 onto the end of a working day. That way I'm staying at it, and I've not really got my head out of work.
In the mode.
Yeah, I've carried on, and I've just rolled straight into it. So if my last meeting's at 4:30, then I can call it a day at 5 o'clock and say, right, between 5 and 7, I'm going to write. Now, it won't always be 2 hours. Sometimes it's an hour. Sometimes you might churn out 1,000 words. Sometimes it's 100. It's about the quality of that work. And if you're not feeling it, give it up for the day.
Allow it when it's flowing, and
exactly
let go when it's not.
And there are going to be days where it flows and it really comes, and you look at the clock and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. That happens. But those are the good days, to be honest. So that doesn't bother me too much. I think my wife disagrees. But then it's about how you organize yourself beyond just the discipline. And it's not just about being disciplined with your time. It's being disciplined about where you store the information, how you store and structure the information. So I keep file folders. I version control every document that I'm working on. I regularly save and back up all of the documents that I'm working on, so I know where I'm up to. If I've issued a document out to somebody for alpha readers, beta readers to review, version control it at that point, so you know that the next version that you're working on is the clean version. Having file folders and it have all organized on your desktop so that you know where things are, also really important, so you can find that right material. Otherwise, you're going to lose things. Keeping character lists. So I wrote a trilogy with over 100 different characters in it.
Wow.
And I've got to keep track of where all those characters are, who's died, who's still alive,
what their evolution is, who they know.
Exactly. How their name is spelt. That's equally important. You've got to keep track of all these things. So just keep a character list so you can be consistent. And other things like you don't want to have characters with names that are too similar. And if you've got that listed down alphabetically, then you can keep track of that. because it's very easy to kind of slip into that. A lot of people find it very difficult coming up with names, so they tend to slip into the, okay, I'm going to focus on names beginning with N, and they don't do it deliberately. It just happens. So
yeah, I'm thinking I keep thinking of Lord of the Rings and things like that, and all the different names in that, and they are most of them are quite different, aren't they, from each other?
yeah,
That's quite a complex setup, isn't it? That kind of writing.
Yeah, and I think as a linguist, J.R.R. Tolkien was extremely a linguist, and he was a university professor. I think he was very structured and organised.
And he created an entire infrastructure, language, maps.
World building is a big part. If you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, I mean, the beauty of that is you don't have to think about real world places. You are creating specific worlds from inside your head.
Yes, you don't have to attach it to real structures in society that we have.
To a degree, you do. So draw out maps or get a map maker to make them for you. That's important. You've got to get it rigid and organised. So if somewhere's in the west, for example, you can't then all of a sudden have it appearing in the south, because it makes no sense. And the reader is going to switch off if it's inconsistent.
Yeah, because it stops them suspending their disbelief, doesn't it? Which is part of what we read novels for, to have our belief suspended and to get off the. And if we see those glitches in the Matrix, it snaps us back into reality, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You've got to keep your writer in the story. And there are many different ways, and I'm still learning about those now, but that's really important. It's about keeping people invested, about them losing themselves in their writing. And quite honestly, I can read books that have been produced by very famous world-class writers that are absolute garbage, and I've read self-published works by people who are brilliant
and should be shouted about.
Absolutely.
This question from Tracy's interesting. I think it's a good moment for you to show us that book again. So do you tend to stick to a particular genre, or is it whatever inspires you regardless of genre? So tell us about that, and in the process bring in this beautiful book that you flashed us with earlier.
So the prevailing wisdom is that writers should write in a specific genre, and they should stick to their genre and never stray outside it. And
that's a rule.
That's a rule, and
we want to break it.
Yeah. So I always have a attracted me to your group. If somebody gives me a spurious rule that I cannot understand why that rule exists and there's no justification for it, I tend to deliberately go out of my way to ignore it. I remember Martin Dawes Telecoms and the white shirt policy. Wore a blue shirt to work for 3 years. And eventually,
I remember being a white shirt policy. I do remember a guy getting hauled in because he was wearing a dress, though, and smashed that out of the water, and rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, mine wasn't so rebellious. I just wore a blue shirt, but yeah.
Sometimes it's the subtleties that make us most rebellious. Spurious, also a great word. You've got some good vocabulary, Gareth. Tracy remembers the white shirt policy.
She'll also remember me wearing the blue shirt and no tie.
I love it.
So
funny.
Yeah, in terms of genre, I don't stick to a single genre. I tend to write what I like, and I read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, and that kind of sticks with me, and that kind of inspires a lot of the work that I write. But I'm not totally tied to that. So, for example, I've written a fantasy trilogy that's based on Celtic mythology because it's something I find fascinating. It's not too serious and tongue-in-cheek, so it's certainly not Lord of the Rings pompous. It's got a bit more of a comedic tone to it, because for me, that's just I grew up reading Terry Pratchett and the likes of Douglas Adams. I think you've got to keep a thread of humor in even the darkest material. You've got to have something in there that makes it
a bit of light relief almost.
Yeah.
Connect to,
Yeah. I mean, if you imagine Coraline by Neil Gaiman, if that had been written as just serious, it would have been terrifying. So you've got to have some a thread of humor in there just to kind of shine out through the darkness. So yeah,
I know
fantasy.
Jack Horner, our resident spoken word artist, or one of them. Him and Carl both probably will massively resonate with that, with their work.
Brilliant. I'd be interested in having a chat with them.
Yeah, you should.
So yeah, fantasy. But like the screenplay that I'm working on at the moment is a crime thriller. But again, it's got the same kind of cheeky humour associated with it. I've got a sitcom that I'm working on. One that is an out and out action adventure show. And then I started writing this, which so a bunch of short stories that are pulled together, which are
The
very
cover.
yeah.
Bring it closer so we can see it in its full glory. Born of inward dreamings.
Yeah.
Look at that. It
So
looks magical and mystical.
this is I designed this myself. So
Love that.
my own job. So this is based heavily on sort of Central and Northern European Gothic fairy tales with a bit of a twist. I'm absolutely fascinated by the Brothers Grimm and what they did of sort of forming compilations. They didn't invent these stories. These were compilations of folk tales that they'd heard all of their lives and that they travelled around Germany and the Alsace region, and they pulled together all of these tales and retold them. And they are much darker than the fairy tales that our parents told us. So that kind of stuck with
Yes,
me. And there's
they are.
yeah, I've
Lisa
written
wants
the
that for
original.
Christmas.
Mm. So yeah, that was kind of the inspiration, the kickoff point for me. So this is the first volume. It's 10 short stories, and it kind of starts and runs kind of from once upon a time through to probably the like 1920s. So yeah,
Wow.
it's got a bit of a span of time. It kind of runs synchronously, and although they're all individual tales that can be read in isolation, there is a thread that follows right the way through, which is consistent throughout the second volume as well.
Purchase that.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Hope you enjoy.
I'll report back.
Please do. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to write, and honestly, when I said before, I wish I'd started with short stories first. I wasn't lying. It helps to structure you because it's the same process. It's just in microcosm. You're starting with a
Yeah.
smaller version of a novel.
And you're repeating that like over and over again,
Yeah.
so you get kind of more practice in it space of time, don't
you
you?
refine it and you get better and you improve. And again, same thing. I've self-published this, but I still sent it off to my editor and asked him to run a pass over it. And he specializes in short stories as well. So
Right, that's good.
yeah. So he gave it the green light and improved it a hell of a lot before I went live with it. But yeah, put it out there. I've not marketed it yet, though. I need to get on that.
Well, maybe this is the start, Gareth.
Yeah, I need to do the big push.
That's brilliant. Love it. So Lisa, I think this is Lisa asking, has writing helped you through any difficult periods of your life?
Yeah, significantly so. I mean, I can think of several. I mean, some are very personal. I won't share too much because obviously I don't want to depress the hell out of everybody on here. But there've been some really tough moments. So just sorry, Kay. Yes, it is really easy to publish on Amazon, and I'll happily have a conversation.
You don't get as much money for it as you should do.
No, you don't. But obviously, you're not having to pay to a publisher. Yeah. It's a platform for getting your work out there.
And you use, is it K? What's the publishing platform?
KDP.
KDP. That's it. Yeah.
Kindle Direct Publishing. It's really easy to do. Yeah. Both in paper and Kindle. Hardback I've not cracked yet, but I've not really tried. I don't really want to charge somebody £30 for a book.
It's got cardboard in it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, in terms of how writing has got me through some difficult periods, we all have challenges in our life. And again, without dwelling on that horrible couple of years where we were all stuck indoors, not able to do anything, what are your choices? Watch Netflix or write? So I spent a lot of time writing. And it was a tough time. I mean, I looked at my own children who were struggling through going to university and not being able to socialise with anybody, being stuck in halls of residence on their own, and missing out on that whole university experience, relationships falling apart because they couldn't see their partner because they couldn't be together.
Or they were two together suddenly, and that was the problem.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and that in itself. I mean, at first it was quite nice that my, at the time, almost all grown up 4 children were back at home. I mean, one had to give up his house because he couldn't afford to stay there anymore because of the pandemic. He lost his job, so had to come home. And it was great at first. I loved spending all that time with my kids. That was the first 2 weeks. After that, it became a little bit more challenging. You start getting under each other's feet, and you start to irritate each other. It can be a lot of time together. So writing was an escape, and that has always been the case for me. It's always been an escape. Being able to share it with other people and them enjoy your work is probably the most gratifying thing in the world, and that's helped to improve my confidence. So it's not just a mask of confidence that I'm putting on. I actually feel more confident in myself, feel a bit validated by that.
Right.
But yeah, that aside, I mean, last year we lost our family pet, a dog. He'd been with us for 13 years, and he was my best friend, and I loved the bones of him. And it was quite sudden, cancer, and we had to watch him go. And I'll be honest, for 3 days solidly afterwards, I just cried my eyes out. I didn't know how to process it, didn't know what to do.
Rightly so.
And so I sat down and started writing about him. I've never shared it with anybody, but I did that just for me. But I wrote about him. And that was really, really therapeutic.
How lovely. What a lovely way to honour him. That's really nice. Oh, I feel a little emotional there. Bless you. Well, I'm gonna ask you
to make that on Etsy for you as well.
Oh, how sweet. What's his name?
This was Oscar.
Oh, bless you, Oscar. Tracy is asking, is a screenplay different to writing a novel? Good question.
Format-wise, yes. I mean, it's story. And every story that you write, whether it's a short story, screenplay, a stage play, they have different formats and different conventions that you have to write in. And that's the most difficult thing to crack. So you need to understand those different ways of writing and different ways of structuring. But ultimately, beginning, middle, and end. That's it. You've got to have a story. You've got to have a compelling story arc and plot line, and you've got to have character
and a hero.
Well, yeah, or an anti-hero. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what? You can write great characters who are terrible people as long as they're compelling. I mean,
people say that a lot, don't they, about fiction or TV things or whatever. I know he's the bad guy, but I really like him and I'm really rooting for him. I mean, that's like quite a knack, I think, to create a character like that.
I mean, let's face it, probably the biggest TV show over the past 20 years is Breaking Bad. And it follows the story of a drug dealer who was actually, as it turns out, a pretty terrible person.
Yeah.
But you rooted for him for nearly, 7 seasons?
Yeah. I found that I've always thought Breaking Bad was one of the best, pieces of mainstream work because of that character development. Because I think there is a pivotal point at which you stop rooting for him and you want what's his name? It's gone out of my head. Jesse to win out, and it's very, very cleverly done.
Yeah, exactly, and that shows the kind of development of a story. Your characters have got to develop. We're all people. We're all humans. And we develop over time. We're not the same people as we were 20 years ago.
Yeah, we all have shadows, and as well as the good things.
Yeah, and good shout on Harley Quinn. I mean, great anti-hero. Even Batman's an anti-hero. Batman's not a good
person. Yeah. I think there is more call for that now, actually, almost, isn't there? Because people perhaps find it more relatable to see the darkness in other people. And
so all the characters I write, I try and base them on reality, and I try to make them as 3-dimensional as possible. So in the trilogy that I wrote, My bad guys are not all bad guys. They all think they're doing the right thing for the right reason. They have their motivations, and they might do terrible things, but they do it because they think it's the right thing to
Because
do.
they've got positive intention. I
Yeah.
mean, again, Breaking Bad
Yeah,
is a great
and
example.
some of the good guys do terrible things. So,
Mm.
but because we're all three-dimensional people, we all have positive and negative facets, and you've got to explore that in your writing, otherwise nobody believes it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And that's part of being a human being, isn't it? So replicating that within your art has to be there for people to really, really anchor into it and emotionally invest in it.
Yeah.
Char's saying writing can be so rebellious. I like that. Kay is saying, is it possible to have an awesome idea for a story and pass it on to someone else who can flesh it out with a collab?
Yes, you've just identified the screenwriting industry.
Nice. There you go, Kay. Well done.
So I'm not sure if you all know, or any of you know, the story of how the show Lost came into being. Some people,
tell us that.
so Lost was a game changer.
Yeah.
So
It was also
before,
completely mad.
oh yeah, it was absolutely insane. But that was right in the crux of the writer's strike.
Right.
So all of a sudden, the head of programming for NBC gets a phone call to say, we've gone on strike. Writers have gone on strike. Our fall season is not going to happen. So we've got all these shows and we've got no writers to write them. So what do you want to do?
I'm just imagining loads of characters like knocking about on a desert island going, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do?
Well, he was on holiday at the time in Barbados, and he's just basically been given a piece of information that means if he doesn't come up with an idea within 24 hours, he's out of a job. He loses his job. So he's lying on this beach and he's just thinking, do you know what? I wish I could just stay on this beach forever. And then he had an idea, and he started thinking, well, what if there's a plane crash? What if people are stuck on the beach? But he's not a creative. This guy is an executive. So what does he do? So he's got to find writers who are willing to write for him in the middle of a writer's strike. So you've got to find out of work writers. So J.J. Abrams, David Benioff, people like that. They were struggling wannabe screenwriters. So, but they were mates of his. So he contacts them and says, look, can you knock something together? I've got to be ready to shoot in 6 weeks. So all the actors that are in it, so every actor that was in it was virtually an unknown. Why was that? Because they were the only actors that were available, because they were virtually unknowns. But they pulled that together in 6 weeks and had shot a pilot. Not literally, they did kill the pilot in the first episode, but they'd shot a pilot in Hawaii, illegally, because they didn't have permission to be filming there.
Oh my God,
they had to gain the permission retrospectively.
Rebellious.
Yeah. And it felt like they were making it up as they were going along, because they were making it up as they were going along. That's why the ending feels so unsatisfactory to people.
Right, okay. So I never saw it. I never saw the end because it was on Sky, and I've not got Sky, but I saw the first, I don't know, couple of series, 3 series, whatever it was that I could get hold
when it
of.
was on Channel 4.
I was like, well, what the hell is going on with this? Like, it feels like someone's just randomly splashing stuff onto a screen, and it's just a bit weird.
Yeah.
And that felt like it literally got lost.
Yes, exactly. And that was exactly what was going on. They were making up a story as they went along with no idea how it was going to pan out. And then they got to a finale and it's like, well, how do we make this satisfying? Because we've no idea what's been going on. We've been hoping that you'd tell us what was happening. And so they just had to make something up. And everybody went, what? Is that it?
What the fuck? Wow. And what was the ending, like, in a nutshell? I never found that out.
So the ending was, in summary, they were all dead the whole time, and they were in.
Of course they were. With it, because I remember there being, like, from the beginning, there was a whole thing about, are they in purgatory? Like, there was that big debate, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So it sounds like that kind of is what happened then.
Yeah, they pretty much leaned into that idea without ever saying that was the case.
Right. And what was the whole clock thing, the clock reset thing about? Did they ever explain that?
Insanity. I think it was something to do with resetting time. So
Wow.
there was some kind of connection to the real world. It was all bizarre. So people could travel back to the real world, but it was insane.
Amazing. I love that. Well, that's fascinating. I know there's definitely people who are watching this going, "Wow, that's just amazing to know that now." I always feel like I've closed a loop that I've been hanging on to for years by knowing that now. That's brilliant. Love it. Well, we're kind of getting towards the end. So, guys, if you've got questions that you want to throw in really quickly, then do it now. But I guess one of the things I want to sort of really, really get your perspective on, I know we spoke about this today, is, what you feel is ahead of us in terms of the world of publishing and writing and all of those things, because it is a very, like you said, a difficult nut to crack. It's a in terms of media in general and written media, it's a weird world now, isn't it?
It really is, and I feel like something of a Luddite as far as books go, print books, because I love print books and I struggle with reading digitally, and I think the world is starting to change and people are consuming stories in a different way. Streaming services have changed the way that we consume, as has social media, as has YouTube. And I think the attention span of the younger generation in particular has really changed. I think they want micro stories. I'll quite happily crack through a George R.R. Martin 1,500-page book, in a couple of days, and that's just me.
Tracy will definitely resonate with that as well.
Yeah.
I am more of a micro reader. I think I like short stories, but yeah. I'm loving this, by the way, Shah. Great question.
Very kind. Thank you. I don't know. But anyway, in terms of where print media is going, I think we've already seen print newspapers have gone the way of Blockbuster Video. They didn't move with the times.
And we all know where that went.
Yeah, exactly. I fear that print publishing for books is heading in the same direction. I think there will always be a core of people who will be avid readers, but I think the demographic is becoming smaller and smaller every year, and that's rather sad. However, breaking into print through traditional print media is getting more and more difficult. Agents, you can't get anywhere near a publisher without having an agent. Agents are the gatekeepers, and I think they are becoming increasingly difficult to get anywhere near. I have had some great feedback from agents. I've had full requests from agents. However, in maybe 90 odd submissions to agents, I've had maybe a dozen replies in 3 years.
Wow.
And that's not great. And a lot of them, it's just like, yeah, I love it, but it's not what I'm looking for. Yeah, I love it, but is the answer. So I've started looking more at publishers, like a couple of mainstream, a couple of smaller publishers who are, I think they've got a bit fed up of agents, and they've said, just send us your material directly, which was always a no-no.
That's interesting.
I think a lot of publishers are saying, look, just come to us directly and we'll filter the wheat from the chaff. But self-publishing is kind of king, and I know even a number of really well-established writers. So Gareth L. Powell, who is probably the foremost science fiction writer in the country right now, possibly in even including the US, he's really prolific. And a number of his novels are being turned into movies and TV shows as we speak. And even he has taken some of his work and he's self-publishing them, because he feels that that's the right thing for him and he doesn't want to be beholden to a publisher. So he's just gone, I'm just going to put this out into the world. And that's great. If that's what you want to do and you're not bothered about making money, just get it out there. Yeah. So that's the market. But again, as much as right now, the publishing industry is telling us people don't buy short stories, I think the attitudes and behaviors of people, particularly the younger generation, are telling us something different. How they consume them, whether it's digitally or on paper, is up for debate. But I think short stories are where it's at.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think we're moving towards this short story thing? Oh, you've frozen on us. I'm assuming people, can people still hear me? Is it just Gareth that's
I can
frozen?
hear you now. It broke up a little bit there.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm wondering whether this short story trend is a bit, perhaps because we are more micro in how we do everything. You know, we go and research something and we want a video that's like less than 3 minutes. You know, we don't want to. We're prepared to binge watch a series on Netflix. You know, an entire 10-episode series in 2 nights, but for some reason, everything else has to be little and bite-sized. Oh, we've lost you again. Well, read Kay's comment until Gareth comes back. Hoping that you can all hear me. Kay says, had an agent. She told me a publisher wanted a book about cancer with a twist, but pushed me to do it in a way that didn't feel right, and she called me uncoachable and we fell out. Yeah, to be fair, Kay, you are a bit of a maverick.
Yeah. The thing is, I've got some great relationships with agents who are fantastic and really open, helpful, supportive. Others, they're playing it by the numbers, and they will try. If they want to take your story in a direction where you don't want to take it, don't let them. It's your story, and ultimately, most of the agents I know, even the ones I get on very well with, they don't like hearing something that they don't want to hear. So they can be quite blunt and vociferous and even rude.
Oh, it's another good word. We're collecting some great words here, Gareth. Vociferous. Love it. That was a comment from Lisa, by the way. We're fast-paced with shorter attention spans. I totally agree with that. And Lisa's a learning professional and absolutely understands that. And Kay quite rightly says, ha, fuck 'em.
Absolutely.
To anyone that applies to. And Shah thinks you're a walking dictionary.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
It's definitely a good thing, I think. I love language and I love vocabulary. It's really cool. Oh, well, this has been an absolutely brilliant interview. Absolutely brilliant. We could talk for so much longer, I reckon. It's gone incredibly fast. We've actually covered all the ground that we wanted to cover and way more. So I think we've done pretty flipping well there, Gareth.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and for everybody for being so welcoming and for your questions. It's been lovely. Thank you.
It's been really, really good. And I guess, you know, what I would like to kind of end on really is what would be your one biggest piece of, you know, your tip, encouragement, advice, or whatever, bit of wisdom that you would give either a budding writer or anybody who wants to indulge in or create a place for them to do their creative thing and make their big dream happen? What would be the standout piece of guidance you would leave people with?
I think I said it earlier on, the best advice I was ever given, and it's 2 words: just right.
Just right. Love it. Just do it. To coin a famous sports brand.
Yeah, we'll have to pay commission on that. You know.
Yeah, sorry, I've got no money, so you can't sue me. I've got a £5. Will that do? And I massively agree with you. Just launch yourself in and absolutely do. If there's that urge in you to get something, you know, out into the world creatively, just do it. And I can't put up the name that somebody's just said, because it's the actual brand and we might actually get in trouble. I don't think they care, do they? So totally agree with you. And that, do you know what, Gareth, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation, and I love how people have responded to it as well. So thank you everybody who has contributed and asked some fantastic questions and added some brilliant comments. And if you're watching this in the future, I'm absolutely sure Gareth would be more than happy to answer your questions.
Please just reach out.
Yeah, totally. So Gareth hangs out in the Rebels and Rule Breakers group on a regular basis, despite not liking anything else on Facebook. So that's kudos. Love that. And this will be also on YouTube. So subscribe if you're watching this via that channel. I'm going to drop it into the group and so on when it's all, you know, downloaded and whatnot. So we can keep this as a nice piece of work between the two of us, and to help guide people through creating their big dream and following their creative urges. Thank you, everybody, for your lovely feedback, including Shah's just there. And last but not least, thank you, Gareth, for doing this for us and kind of launching yourself in there and following that nudge. Despite the fact it can sometimes be a bit weird and nerve-wracking doing something like this, can't it?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Me too. Well, we're going to sign out now. I'm going to talk to you back in the green room when we're backstage. And we just need to give everybody a wave now. And thank you very much for being with us, everybody, Rebels and Rule Breakers, and anybody else watching. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.